The Kansas City Chiefs trade up in order to make sure they can land Nohl Williams at 85 overall. There are a lot of things to get into with this pick, so we're going to hit the ground running here. Now, who is Nohl Williams out of Cal? 6 foot and 3/8 inches, basically 6 foot 1/2 inches tall, 199 pounds, 30 3/4 inch arms, 9-inch hands, 4.50 40-yard dash with a 1.54 10-yard split. Not the greatest 40-yard dash. So you're dealing with a cornerback that is not quite going to be the fastest guy on the field there. 33.5-inch vert, 10-foot long jump, and those are decent numbers. The vert is not what you want to see. The broad jump is okay. 19 reps on the bench press, though. This is a solid and strong athlete. Now, he did 3 years at Nevada, Las Vegas, and then ended his career in 23 and 24 in California. You're looking at a guy who is a ball hawk. 14 interceptions in his college career, 7 just last season, 54 return yards and a touchdown. Also, is always around the ball, so has 3 fumble recoveries in that time as well. Now look, this is a ball hawk, not a workout warrior. He had 7 interceptions last season, which I believe led the nation, and he was an All-American in the process. Again, those 14 interceptions during his college career, that's a good mark there. It means you have a guy who is always aware. And not a whole lot of these that I saw were off of tipped passes either. So sometimes you have a guy like Mike Edwards, always kind of in the right vicinity, but doesn't make a whole lot of clean interceptions, ends up with a lot of batted passes, things like that. That's not what you get here from Nohl Williams. He is in the clear. Now, that athletic profile is not really all that to write home about, but that's not necessarily the end of the world. What I have on the screen here are 2 guys on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as success is concerned, but who are right there with him as far as athleticism is concerned. So Nohl Williams is the top set of numbers. Chris Harris is the middle set of numbers, and then Kamal Hadden, who was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs just last year and did not play for the Kansas City Chiefs. He is currently in Green Bay, I think it is. So Nohl is 6 foot and 3/4 inches. He has an advantage over Chris Harris, 5'9" there, but we're going to get into something that is wild in a moment. And Kamal Hadden was 6'1", so he is much closer to Kamal Hadden's height. All of these guys in the mid to upper 190s, 199 for Nohl Williams, 194 for Chris Harris, 196 for Kamal Hadden. Here's where we get to something eye-popping. 30 3/4 inch arms for Nohl Williams. That is not the greatest number in the world, but really it's nothing terrible. Then you get to Chris Harris. You remember Chris Harris. Chris Harris, a guy that you seemingly could never get an edge on as a quarterback wide receiver tandem. Why was that? 35 1/4 inch arms. 35 1/4 inch arms as a man who was 5'9" tall. You did not have a clean passing lane when Chris Harris was guarding you. 30 7/8 inches for Kamal Hadden. So again, Kamal Hadden and Nohl Williams, very close there. Then you have the hand size. Nohl Williams with 9, Chris Harris 9 1/4, and Kamal Hadden with 8.5. Now we get to the 40-yard dash. And Kamal Hadden was a bit of a confusing prospect here, but the 40-yard dash for Nohl Williams, 4.50, not what you want to see. Chris Harris was a 4.48, so right around there. That is the difference in nose length when you are running the 40-yard dash, but it was an edge to Chris Harris. Kamal Hadden with a 4.59, so Nohl Williams is much closer to Chris Harris than Kamal Hadden, but the 10-yard splits, Nohl Williams with a 1.54, Chris Harris a 1.59. Kamal Hadden had the fastest 10-yard split at 1.51. So maybe he just got tired running the 40. The 20-yard shuttle, 4.25 for Nohl Williams, 4.20 for Chris Harris, and then a 4.31. down here for Kamal Hadden. So he had the slowest 40, 6.97, 3-cone drill, 7.01 for Chris Harris. So very close there. And then a 7.15 for Kamal Hadden. The braking ability was not there for Kamal Hadden. 33.5-inch vert for Nohl Williams, 34 for Chris Harris, 34.5 for Kamal Hadden. And again, their broad jumps all in that same area. 10 foot for Nohl Williams, 10 foot 1 for Chris Harris, and 10 foot 2 for Kamal Hadden. So you were hoping that with the athletic profile, you are trending closer to Chris Harris on the field than Kamal Hadden. Kamal Hadden, again, did not really play for the Kansas City Chiefs. But when you're looking at this athletic profile, this is what that looks like with percentages. So besides the bench press, you have a guy that is not exceptional anywhere. His bench press is 86th percentile, but that 40-yard dash, 48th percentile. The shuttle numbers, 43rd percentile for 3-cone drill, 30th percentile for short shuttle. So hopefully you're looking at someone closer to Chris Harris than Kamal Hadden. But when you're looking at what's on the field, that is certainly the case. Kamal Hadden didn't really, if memory serves me correctly, produce very much at all in college, whereas Nohl Williams has. So getting into the trade stuff here, they traded next year's 4th-round pick in order to move up. In order to move up 10 spots, that is a steep price in the 3rd round. So he's going to have to make up for that to bring value to the organization. But what that tells me is that Brett Veach is very good at having intel on other teams. How that is, I do not know. I would not deign to speculate, but I imagine what that might mean is they thought that Nohl Williams was going to go to one of the intervening teams between their 95th pick and the 85th pick. It also might mean that the Kansas City Chiefs organization thought that this was their last chance to go in and get a cornerback that they know can contribute as a rookie. So either they know he can contribute as a rookie or he has the highest ceiling available for the corners that they knew of. So when you look at the selection of Nohl Williams, you kind of have to look at him as 2 selections, this year's 3rd and next year's 4th. And you're looking at that for a guy who you think is going to be the 3rd or 4th corner? I don't think so. Mike Bradway, who is the director of player personnel for the Kansas City Chiefs, said that Nohl Williams was relatively high on their board, and he talked about him being an outside cornerback. So they think that he can be, I believe what you're saying there is a number 2 cornerback in the NFL. He said that Nohl Williams has safety versatility. I'll have to look more into it. I don't think Nohl played any safety in college. He also said that he has some inside versatility. I don't know that I see that necessarily, and I certainly don't see that with Trent McDuffie already on the roster. Trent McDuffie is elite as a slot corner. So he's got versatility, and Bradway also said that he has special teams versatility as well as possibilities as a kick returner. So we will have to see how that plays out, but it does bode well for Nohl Williams as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, watching him, one thing that really, really stands out is that he has elite ball tracking ability, and he seems to know where the ball is going to land at the quarterback's release point. When you see his interceptions, a lot of times it seems that Nohl Williams is back there just waiting on that pass to come out of the sky. So going to be very interesting to see if he can translate that to the NFL, if he's able to make the reads necessary at the NFL level and not have to rely on catch-up speed, right? With that 4.5 40-yard dash, and there is a trend of sub 4.4 wide receivers in the NFL. Can he keep up with those guys to the point necessary where he will be able to get interceptions in the NFL? He yielded just a 40.1 rating when targeted last season, which is that's a great number for a guy who played, I believe, 600-ish snaps last year as a starting cornerback with pass-happy college football. So it is a little bit weird that he still yielded a 40.1 while he intercepted 7 passes and returned 1 for a touchdown. But I don't know, without having access to all of his snaps, why that would, where that rating comes out, if it's just that the interceptions culminating were so dastardly for opposing ratings that that's what really played into it, or if he does have good pass breakup ability. So he is able to get his hands in there and stop things. He does make some breakups after nearly possession by the wide receiver, so the receiver will get his hands on it and get that ball slapped away. So that is interesting as well, especially if he is someone who is going to trail a little bit as a corner. He did play against Elik Eomanor, a guy whose name always destroys me. Elik ran a 4.44 40-yard dash, and I have to say that Nohl Williams made him look slow while he was on the field. Not sure exactly what's going on there, if he's just really good at reading routes or what, but that is what stood out to me, how slow Elik Eomanor looked running his routes against Nohl Williams. So this is a press man corner with the ability to grow into a starter. I think that this is a guy that could become a number 2 corner in the league. He looks faster than a 4.50 on the field. And what that might be is he's one of these guys who's never truly had his athleticism tested. Because running a 40-yard dash is non-competitive, right? You're not running against anyone. You're just on the field being trusting yourself to run as fast as you can. He looks smooth, and sometimes that translates into a guy that just doesn't know the full extent of his speed. And on a lot of his breakaway interceptions, his breakaway kick returns, you see a guy that's just cruising down the field, running just fast enough that no one catches him, which is interesting. If he is able to, if there is another gear in him, the NFL is going to have to bring it out of him. The press, quote unquote, of the press man corner is going to need to be worked on, because he does line up very close to wide receivers. He does not really get his hands on them in that first 5 yards. He doesn't really get his hands on them in order to throw them off early. So I'm not sure what he's doing there, but if anyone's going to coax that out of him, it's going to be Steve Spagnuolo, because it looks to me like he does have the ability, he does have the stuff necessary to really disrupt a wide receiver's routes, and he's letting them get basically free releases despite the fact that he's 2 yards off of them. And if he is a 4.5 guy, he does not have that extra gear. He's just a smooth athlete. Then being inside those 2 yards and getting your hands on a wide receiver is going to help you really make that transition into coverage and throw things off just enough for the wide receiver that if you're up against a guy who does run a 4.35, then you're not going to get outclassed because early in the route you were able to disrupt things. So that is going to be a big coaching area for Nohl Williams during his rookie season, when he does not have to play, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but he will be able to work on things this season and not be a burden to the defense. He will be able to work on things this year and not throw off the entire defense. When you watch him, he's an interesting cornerback because he has 80% L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, he's a guy who's up there. He's a guy who, now I say in the first 5 yards, he doesn't throw off the receiver, but downfield, he is keeping contact and he is turning towards the ball. So you see a lot of L'Jarius Sneed in that part of his game. But there's also 20% Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters, by the way, turnover machine, ran a 4.53 40-yard dash. Marcus Peters, I believe his second year, led the NFL in interceptions, did he not? I might be wrong on that. I did not check. But Marcus Peters, when Nohl Williams is in zone, he will remind you a lot of Marcus Peters, because he does, I think, try to bait the quarterback, and he does keep his eyes in the backfield. In man, he gets a little bit thrown off with keeping his eyes in the backfield early in the play. And I think that is going to be something that will cause problems for him perhaps in the NFL, where early play recognition for runs is important, because I saw him a couple times in man coverage really cover the wide receiver when it was a running play and it opens up a lane outside. So can he work on that? Where is the awareness as far as that is concerned? Probably it's just coaching, right? You hope that it's just coaching, and he can get coached up to more down and distance awareness. I imagine that's what's going on there. When he's figuring it is a pass play, he is not as heavy into play recognition. He's just covering the man across from him. Now, interesting for this Chiefs defense, because Trent McDuffie and Christian Fulton, I think, are the two starters. Trent McDuffie for sure. Christian Fulton or Jalen Watson, I think those guys are going to be battling it out in camp, but I don't think Christian Fulton came here thinking I'm going to be the number 3 corner. Now you have a guy like Nohl Williams, who is, in my opinion, going to be competing for a number 2 cornerback spot in his career, which means to see him as the number 4 corner on this team is really daunting for opposing offenses, and something that you have to wonder during this year, will preference be given to Nohl Williams being on the field versus Jalen Watson, because Jalen Watson might not be here next year. Speaking of players who might not be here next year, Joshua Williams and Najee Johnson, both of whom have starting experience in their career, both of whom have logged serious numbers of snaps, Najee Johnson in just one season, but Joshua Williams over the length of his 3-year career to this point, have logged a lot of snaps, and those are cornerbacks 5 and 6 for this team right now. And there's a couple of the guys bouncing around the roster that are interesting and could who've proven themselves as NFL corners, and a couple of guys who have a whole lot of potential. So how many corners do the Chiefs take into the season? You have to wonder whether or not Joshua Williams and Najee Johnson are now in a training camp battle for the final cornerback spot, final 2 cornerback spots on the roster, because there's a couple other guys. Cornerback 6, if you keep 6 corners, isn't going to get a whole lot of playing time. So you're maximizing that spot for a guy who's going to contribute on special teams. You're maximizing that spot for a guy who has a very high ceiling. And Darius Rush is still one of those guys, in my opinion, who has a very high ceiling, who can do a lot of things athletically. He might not have translated that to cornerback yet, but that speed for Darius Rush, that size, is going to do well in the special teams departments. So Joshua Williams, not the fastest guy. Najee Johnson, a fast guy, but not the thickest guy. Where are these two heading into the season? So there was a lot of chatter about Jalen Watson being a tradable asset heading into the draft. I don't see that happening this year. I think that Brett Veach is going to be in love with the idea of having Trent McDuffie, Christian Fulton, Jalen Watson, and Nohl Williams on this team, because that is very formidable when you're looking at a 4-deep cornerback roster. But Joshua Williams and Najee Johnson, at that 5 and 6 spot, when you have a couple veterans on the team that provide a high floor, and you have a couple of very interesting younger guys who have a high ceiling, what do they choose to do there? Could Joshua Williams and Najee Johnson be tradable assets coming out of the draft, going into the season, once the dust kind of settles on the draft and everyone knows exactly what it is that they have, and you get the preseason done and teams realize, yeah, we thought we had a cornerback number 3. We really do not. Could Joshua Williams be flipped there? You're looking at a 5th corner on the Kansas City Chiefs. Could you flip him for something that is useful next year? Now, the Chiefs here traded a 4th round pick in next year's draft. I don't think you're getting a 4th round pick for Joshua Williams or Najee Johnson. I think you could maybe get a fifth out of Joshua Williams, but I think that's a stretch. You could just be reclaiming draft capital, 6th or 7th round picks with Joshua Williams or Najee Johnson moving forward. But either way, Nohl Williams gives this team some problems in a good way. Personnel problems in a good way, because you're looking at guys who might not make the roster who have formerly started games for you. Anyway, guys, that is what I have this video. I will be back later today with some of these picks. I'll be back with all of the UDFAs, and there's already videos on the channel for Josh Simmons and all of the picks the Chiefs have made to this point. So if you have not checked those out yet, be sure to do so. I am trying my best to give the most in-depth draft coverage for the Kansas City Chiefs on all of YouTube. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.